Hello and welcome to the Eating Disorder Therapist podcast. I'm Harriet Frew, eating disorder therapist, here to support you in overcoming disordered eating and finding peace with food. So thank you so much for being here. Now, what I want to talk about today is 4 things I'm navigating in overcoming people pleasing. Okay, now I know people pleasing is a hot topic. So many of my clients struggle with this. And this is something that I have struggled with throughout my life. And it's only in very recent years that I really feel that I'm making some significant progress and coming out the other side. Hooray to that. So let's dive in. Peeling back the many onion layers in understanding my bulimia, I acknowledge that this was deeply rooted in not feeling good enough. In fact, I felt wildly incompetent and a disappointment to those I cared about. So I really struggled to reconcile my own needs. I think I've always had a very strong internal voice, but in terms of being able to listen to that and trust that, I really struggled with that because I had a really strong desire to please those around me who I loved. And I guess, particularly as a teenager, back then, when I wanted to follow my aligned path, when I wanted to leave the farm, go off to university, be independent, it brought a lot of disapproval and rejection, particularly from my dad. So I learned quite young, because I guess this was a pattern that happened from when I was really young. So listening to and trusting myself became quite an alien concept. It was something I just wasn't used to doing. And I learned very well to twist myself to gain the approval of others. And then, unconsciously, I would repeat this time and time again in my relationships. And I just remember I used to think that this was a good quality, really, but I felt that I could almost adjust to be whatever the person in front of me needed me to be. I could just twist myself to be that person. Now, in some ways, you could argue that is a helpful skill to some degree, but if that is what you're doing in all your relationships and you're completely abandoning yourself and not listening to your own needs, that is not healthy. So for me, although my recovery from binge eating, restricting and purging stopped 2 decades ago, the deeper work to heal my perennial need to please has been a lifelong journey. So I thought I'd just share first as well some of the ways in which my chronic people pleasing has shown its head. Okay, so some examples here that you may relate to. So buying unwanted household gadgets from a door-to-door salesman because I felt I couldn't say no to them. I would always feel guilty and responsible for this poor salesman that was not making any sales and feel that I needed to somehow rescue him or her. And I mean, it's bonkers really looking back, but I'd buy things I didn't need just to please the other person. Next one, staying passive in a gossipy conversation whilst not standing up for the absent friend simply to avoid friction. And this is something I'm not proud of because I think, again, I have a strong sense of authenticity and also I really value friendship, being a good friend, being open, honest, etc. But in the past, I may have stayed quiet and passive, not really stood up for that person, again, just to avoid the friction in the moment. Another one, not ending unhealthy romantic relationships because the other person was getting their needs met, even if I was unhappy. Now, this was something, again, I used to find it really confusing because the other person seemed perfectly happy because, of course, I was kind of people pleasing them and twisting and trying to kind of make everything on their terms. I was then deeply unhappy, but I found it so hard to validate my own needs. I just completely abandoned myself. Another one, drinking too much alcohol to fit in and seem cool. Another one, not addressing red flags in friendships to keep the peace short term, then erupting with frustration and intense emotional dysregulation when the volcano of suppressed emotion blew everything out of the water. There's something again, it happened to me a lot in my 20s where I would get into quite intense friendships, I would people please, I would suppress all my own needs, I would pretend everything was fine, and then one day all of that suppressed emotion would build up and would have a big fallout and the relationship would be just blown out of the water because it was based on a lot of fakeness really and not authenticity and honesty. Another one, not asserting my own taste in music or food preferences to please others. So the memory of eating baked beans, which I really did not like as a child. They were my kind of worst food, particularly as a teenager. And listening to Gloria Estefan whilst secretly gagging at these baked beans, not to displease my friend at the time, because my friend was just a huge fan of baked beans. Again, it seems bonkers, doesn't it? But I just felt I needed to people please and fit in. So those are just a few examples, and hopefully you might be able to relate to some of those. So over the years, I feel that I've really been gaining momentum and having some wins in people pleasing banishment. But it's also come with some excruciatingly painful realizations and facing harsh realities that I protected myself from. I think it's really important to talk about all of this because I think we have a lot of messages on social media and stuff like about being assertive, don't abandon yourself, etc., etc. But we're often people pleasing because it's a survival and protective mechanism to keep us safe, because of the fear of abandonment and rejection and disappointing others is so strong. So it is a survival strategy, and when we stop people pleasing, we have to come face to face with some of those things that we've been avoiding, and that can be really difficult to sit with to start with. So I'm going to be talking about some of these things. So 4 things from my pleasing recovery journey. So number 1, the loss. So if you've lived parts of your life in accommodating fakeness, not as a deliberate manipulation, but more as a survival against perceived rejection or abandonment, when you begin to step into a more authentic version of yourself, it's like shaking your life upside down and inside out. It's painful and unfamiliar. Now, some people will really be rooting for you, encouraging you to speak your truth and bravely become your courageous self. They're just really there for it. And some are clearly not. And this can be a hard pill to swallow. Because I guess when you're people pleasing, it temporarily smooths over hidden cracks in relationships and offers a glossy vision of harmony and happiness. And also, if you're people pleasing in relationships, other people might be benefiting in some way from your people pleasing and be quite miffed if you stop. But naturally, it's not likely sustainable long term, and a relationship breakdown might be only a few honest conversations away if you are daring enough to initiate them. So people pleasing relationships do not feel safe. People pleasing, although a temporary balm to the moment, creates tension and pressure within the pleaser. It drives inner frustration and complete rage, albeit sometimes unconsciously. Now, I know for me, if you'd asked me a few years ago, Harriet, are you an angry person at all? Or do you ever feel angry? I'd be like, no, never angry, very, very kind of calm person. But I never expressed my anger directly. Instead, I would gossip, vent, talk about my woes in all the wrong places. I would never actually address the target of frustration directly. I just moan about someone to someone else. I would never actually assertively communicate with them. So I have lost people whilst navigating a more authentic path, as we were very attached to the old versions of each other. Too much of the relationship was built on fantasy and projection rather than honest reality. So stripping this away can leave a cold reality, a fake attachment and fragile friendship. And it's a process of deep sadness and grief to mourn the relationship you had. And, it can be really sad as well, because I think when you really realise, oh my goodness, this relationship was just based all on kind of people pleasing and it wasn't really real and authentic, kind of shapes your whole reality kind of upside down, really, because what had a lot of meaning to you and perhaps formed part of your identity, and maybe this friendship and this person was so important, and then you kind of realise, goodness me, it's all been based on people pleasing. Well, maybe not all, but a big part of it's been based on people pleasing and fakeness. That is really a hard reality to face, but it's a necessary one, okay? And the future can then feel uncertain and unpredictable. Will I be genuinely liked if I show up as the real me? Can feel very, very scary. Okay, number 2, overthinking everything and lack of trust. Now, when you've consistently outsourced your decisions and fawned others, your inner trust muscle is weak. So it's natural to experience significant doubt and insecurity when you come to flex it. You'll be thinking can I trust my inner knowing? Am I being reasonable? What if I've just become demanding or selfish? Will I regret this decision later? How will I cope with disappointing others? Now, I have found that the self-trust knowledge is often there, clear and defined from within, if I stop, pause, breathe, and listen. It's a quiet knowing. So, for example, maybe if someone invites me to go out for lunch with them, in my body, I will almost immediately either feel a yes, like a rise in energy, like a stepping forward, like that makes me feel positive, uplifted, inspired, maybe, or I will feel a sinking feeling of like no, or that just feels like heavy, and maybe I feel resentment or just not drawn to wanting to make that decision. And it might not always be about the particular person. Sometimes it might just be I've had a really busy week or there's too much going on. But often I think when we are asked something, we often have an immediate response in the body. But the thing is, can you trust the knowing and go with it? Because the temptation to seek opinions from others or to justify my decision, maybe by Googling the pertinent questions to ChatGTP, can do all these things. It can lead to overthinking, questioning, and self-doubt, when really you kind of know the answer already, but it's really hard to follow through. And it's profoundly uncomfortable and hard to navigate the uneasy space between the thought and action. And I know for me, the more I ruminate the decision, the uncertainty expands exponentially, whereas a more empowered and decisive response, leaning into the knowing, reduces the uncertainty gap and strengthens self-trust by another %. So I would say with this as well, to develop that self-trust muscle, you just have to keep making decisions, repeat. And sometimes you will get it wrong, but it's okay, because every time you are doing it, you are strengthening that muscle and learning more about yourself. Number 3, disappointing others. The fear of disappointing others has often felt completely unbearable to me. It would leave me feeling icky, excruciating, irrational guilt of being a letdown and failure. And it activated all my childhood wounds of wanting to be the good girl and avoid abandonment. But it's an impossible task to please everyone all of the time. The self-abandonment that arises from this way of living leads to a gradual eroding of self-worth and a shame spiral of self-loathing. And in many times, others do not care anywhere near as much as you think they do. My expectations of disappointment are magnified out of all proportion. In fact, others generally welcome the straightforwardness and honesty of direct truth. The relationship is clear, genuine, and honest, a breath of fresh air. Occasionally, if the other is disappointed, I've survived. They're entitled to their disappointment, and that's okay. And the relationship can hold some disappointment while staying merrily afloat. And I've learned that relationships are imperfect. The ups and downs can be navigated with grace and kindness while individuals express their needs. Number 4, authenticity. When I chronically people pleased, it bothered me to the roots of my core being, as authenticity is one of my highly valued traits. So I would constantly simmer frustrated energy as hidden thoughts and feelings bubbled beneath the surface, unsaid and unspoken. And I carried this energy with me daily, and it was exhausting emotionally. Now, direct and assertive communication has mostly enhanced my life 100%. People appreciate honest conversations. You'll be respected, if not always liked. And these relationships are built on trust and openness. There is no hiding and greater safety and security. And the quality of connections is high, and you may have less of them, but it doesn't matter. And I've noticed in my relationships with others who struggle with people pleasing that I find myself always second guessing what they really think. Do they really believe this, or are they saying something to get my approval? It feels unsafe, less respectful, less trustworthy. I see it as it was me. So people pleasing will likely always hold a tiny thorn in my side, as the motherboard of coping was set very young for me. However, I'm optimistic that further change is possible, and hopefully by the time I'm 99 years young, if not sooner, there will be no people-pleasing bones left in my body. Have you struggled with people-pleasing? Are you struggling with it on an ongoing basis? Do let me know. I'd love to hear from you. So thank you so much for listening today. If you're not following me already on Instagram, do seek me out at the Eating Disorder Therapist _. For further support with your relationship with food, do go to the eatingdisordertherapist.co.uk. If you enjoy this podcast, I would be so grateful if you'd follow, rate and review, as it helps it reach so many more listeners. Thank you so much for listening today, and I look forward to sharing another podcast episode with you very soon.